The mist clung to everything that morning. Thick gray fog rolled across the Lorraine countryside like a living thing. It swallowed sound. It masked movement. It turned the world into a maze of shadows and uncertainty. Somewhere in that white void, death was prowling forward on steel tracks. German Panther tanks, 45 tons each. Their long guns could punch through American armor from over a mile away. These were the Reich's finest weapons, Hitler's answer to Patton's racing advance across France. The thunder of engines grew louder through the fog, deep, mechanical, relentless. To the Americans waiting in shallow foxholes and hastily dug positions, that sound meant one thing. The storm was coming. What they had to stop it seemed laughably inadequate. The M18 Hellcat weighed barely 20 tons. Its armor was so thin a rifle bullet could penetrate it in places. Crews joked nervously that their protection consisted of prayer and wishful thinking. Yet the Hellcat possessed something the German monsters lacked: speed, pure, breathtaking velocity that could carry it across open ground at 50 miles per hour. It was the fastest tracked vehicle in the entire war. This speed would either save them or get them killed in the next few hours. September 1944, near Arracourt, the fog was about to lift. When it did, the world would witness something that defied all logic. Lightweight predators stalking the Reich's heaviest armor. David preparing to face Goliath with nothing but courage and a high-velocity gun. The battle that followed would rewrite the rules of armored warfare forever. General George Patton stood on a ridge overlooking the carnage 3 days later. Smoking German hulks dotted the valley below like tombstones. His weathered face showed grim satisfaction as he turned to Colonel Bruce Clark. This is the kind of thing that will end the war quicker than anybody had hoped. Those words would echo through history. But they came at a price written in blood and steel across the muddy fields of eastern France. How did paper-thin tank destroyers tear apart Germany's finest armor? How did speed triumph over brute force? The answer lay in those fog-shrouded September days when the impossible became reality. Everything had started so well for the Reich just months earlier. The summer of 1944 brought disaster cascading down on German forces. Allied armies burst from the Normandy hedgerows like water through a broken dam. Patton's Third Army led the charge eastward. His armored spearheads sliced deep into France with stunning momentum. Supply lines stretched to breaking points. Fuel became more precious than ammunition, yet the advance never slowed. Each mile gained brought American forces closer to the German border, closer to the Reich itself. Hitler could not tolerate such progress. His vaunted Wehrmacht was retreating across ground it had conquered in triumph 4 years before. Morale cracked among his generals. Political pressure mounted with each passing week of defeat. Something dramatic was needed. A counterstroke to shatter American momentum. Time to regroup and reorganize defensive lines. Out of this desperation emerged the Panzer brigades. New formations rushed into combat with minimal training, but equipped with Germany's most feared weapons. The Panzer IV remained reliable and deadly. The Tiger struck terror into Allied crews wherever it appeared. But above all came the Panther. This steel monster weighed over 45 tons of pure menace. Its long-barreled 75mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 1 mile. Thick frontal armor seemed virtually impenetrable to standard American guns. German crews trusted the Panther above all other weapons. It embodied everything the Reich believed about warfare: weight, armor, devastating firepower at long range, This was the hammer intended to smash Patton's thin lines, stop his advance cold, buy precious time for Hitler's crumbling forces. The theory seemed sound. The reality was about to crash into an entirely different philosophy of war. American designers had taken a radically different approach with the M18 Hellcat. Where Germans built thick armor, Americans chose speed. Where Panthers relied on weight, Hellcats emphasized agility. The contrast could not have been starker. The Hellcat could sprint across battlefields at 50 miles per hour. It was lean, fast, built not to absorb punishment, but to deliver it from unexpected angles. Its high-velocity 76mm gun lacked the brutal power of German 88s, but it could penetrate Panther armor from the sides and rear. That was enough. Survival depended entirely on speed and cunning. Hellcat crews needed every trick, every maneuver, every ounce of daring they possessed. By September 1944, these two philosophies of warfare were racing toward collision. The battlefield would be the rolling hills and small villages of Lorraine, near a place called Arracourt that few had ever heard of. The 4th Armored Division and its attached tank destroyer battalions prepared defensive positions. They dug in to await the inevitable German assault. What followed would test more than just steel and armor. It would pit doctrine against doctrine, philosophy against philosophy. The soul of modern warfare hung in the balance. German forces struck first, not at Arracourt itself, but further south around Luneville. Panther tanks and Panzer Grenadiers advanced with confidence. Their armor seemed unstoppable. American resistance appeared fragile, but the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion was ready. Their M10s and the 1st M18 platoons occupied concealed positions on high ground. They waited patiently for German columns to expose themselves. The deadly game of ambush was about to begin. September 18th brought the first major clash. Company B of the 704th held positions northwest of Luneville. German armor emerged from morning haze, silhouettes dark against the pale sky. American gunners held their fire until the range closed. Then they unleashed devastation. Panthers appeared through smoke and mist, only to be struck from flanking positions. The duel was savage and immediate. American crews worked their guns with cold efficiency, high explosive rounds to adjust aim, armor-piercing shells to finish the job. Fire erupted across the battlefield. Orange flames clawed at the gray morning sky. By nightfall, 3 Panther hulks smoldered in the gathering darkness. The Americans had held their ground, but victory came at a terrible price. Lieutenant Colonel Bill Bailey, commanding the 704th, died the following day. German mortar fire caught him in Luneville's narrow streets. His loss shook the battalion, but reinforcements poured in to strengthen the defensive line. The 603rd and 778th Tank Destroyer Battalions joined the fight. The 42nd Cavalry Squadron clung to town blocks with desperate determination. Every building became a fortress, every street corner a potential ambush site. Second Lieutenant Richard Buss positioned his platoon near a railway embankment. He waited patiently for Panthers to cross the exposed ground. When the moment came, his gunners struck with textbook precision. One Panther burst into flames immediately. The second limped away, trailing smoke and sparks. Tank destroyer crews began to understand their survival depended not on armor, but on mobility, coordination, and speed. Luneville was proving their tactics worked, but it was only the beginning. The real storm was gathering further north near Arracourt itself. The newly formed 113th Panzer Brigade moved through darkness along narrow country roads. Steel tracks ground against pavement. Engines rumbled through the night air. Just after midnight on September 19th, American listening posts detected the ominous sounds. Artillery fire was called in immediately. Some German movement halted under the bombardment, but the main column pushed forward through the darkness toward its objective. Dawn brought the thick fog that would define the coming battle. Visibility collapsed to mere yards. What should have been the Panthers' greatest advantage turned against them. The mist robbed their long-range guns of effectiveness. It forced them into knife-fighting range where nimble Hellcats could strike and vanish. Captain William Dwight was patrolling near the village of Leasy when he stumbled upon something terrifying. The rear elements of a German tank column moving silently through the fog. He slipped away undetected and radioed the urgent warning. Minutes later, Sherman tanks south of the village blundered straight into lead Panthers. The distance was barely 75 yards. Muzzle flashes lit the fog like lightning. The firefight was instantaneous and brutal. 3 Panthers were knocked out at point-blank range. Fire erupted through the mist, turning the gray morning into an orange inferno. The survivors withdrew immediately, disappearing back into the concealing fog. The battlefield had transformed into a ghostly arena. Steel monsters emerged from white void without warning. They fired. They died. They vanished again into the mist. Orders crackled through radio networks. Captain Thomas Evans of Company C, 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, dispatched Lieutenant Edwin Leiper's platoon of M18 Hellcats to reinforce crumbling defensive positions. They moved northeast of Arracourt as fog swirled around their vehicles. Dark silhouettes began appearing in the mist, hulking Panthers sliding forward like prehistoric beasts. Their turrets swung blindly, searching for targets they could barely see. The stage was set for the most extraordinary tank duel of the Second World War. First light on September 19th brought no relief from the choking fog. White mist blanketed everything, turning the world into a maze of shadows and uncertainty. From that shifting wall of vapor came the deep growl of German engines. The 113th Panzer Brigade was advancing blind, hunting American positions with growing confidence. Hellcats waited in shallow depressions, hull-down positions that exposed only their turrets. The tactic was elegantly simple, yet devastatingly effective. Lie low, fire fast, vanish before the enemy could respond. The first encounter erupted without warning. A Panther materialized from the fog, its outline ghostly against the white backdrop. An M18 crept forward, the gunner peering through his sight at barely visible shadows. The first round was high explosive to adjust range and bearing. The second was armor-piercing death. It struck home with devastating effect. Fire burst from the German tank's hull, consuming the silhouette in brilliant orange flame. But every muzzle flash revealed the Hellcats' position to other Panthers prowling through the mist. German guns answered immediately, their shells ripping into earth and steel. 3 Hellcats were destroyed in those opening exchanges. One tragically stalled its engine while in full view of German gunners. Another was knocked out while attempting to tow its disabled comrade to safety. The price of this deadly game was becoming clear. Still, the American crews refused to yield ground. Corporal Frederick Stewart served as gunner in Sergeant Emma Lois Stacy's Hellcat. He fired with methodical precision, destroying 2 Panthers in rapid succession. Then German shells found their position. The blast tore into the turret, wounding both Stacy and Stewart while killing another crewman instantly. Corporal John Eidenschink fought from Sergeant Pat Ferrari's vehicle, scoring 3 confirmed kills before enemy fire disabled their Hellcat. Sergeant Steve Krusky's crew pressed forward with reckless determination, destroying 4 Panthers before their luck finally ran out. Their vehicle was knocked out, scattering wounded survivors into the muddy field. Through the chaos, Sergeant Edwin McGurk's Hellcat remained in the fight. His gunner, Corporal Dominic Serafino, loaded and fired with mechanical precision as German armor advanced through the mist. 2 more Panthers fell, their hulks burning like funeral pyres in the gray morning. By mid-morning, the battlefield resembled a steel graveyard. Smoke and flame mingled with natural fog, creating an otherworldly landscape of destruction. Silhouettes shifted like ghosts as the battle raged at knife-fighting distance. The Panthers' magnificent long-barreled guns, designed for devastating long-range engagements, lost their advantage in this close-quarters arena. Nimble Hellcats darted between positions, struck from unexpected angles, then disappeared again into the concealing mist. Captain Thomas Evans recognized the critical nature of the situation developing around him. He gathered his battered companies and redeployed surviving vehicles to high ground south of Arracourt. Engineers hastily dug defensive positions while Hellcats formed a thin but determined line. This was the last barrier protecting the command post and its vital artillery from the German thrust. When fog began lifting just before noon, the sight that greeted defenders was sobering. 30 to 40 Panthers advancing in formation, rolling forward with mechanical precision and deadly intent. Evans gave the order that would define the battle. "Hold your positions. Wait for my command." He remembered later the profound silence that settled over his men, every hand tense on triggers and controls, hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. At 1,500 yards, the order came sharp and clear. Fire! The first 2 Panthers erupted in flame, their burning hulks immediately blocking the narrow road. The rest of the formation faltered, some tanks turning sideways in confusion and panic. It was a fatal mistake that exposed their vulnerable flanks to American guns. From concealed positions all along the ridge line, Hellcats unleashed volley after devastating volley. Each shot slammed into German armor with tremendous force. Each crew worked their guns with practiced efficiency. Shell casings piled at their feet like brass carpets. Flames rose across the entire horizon, turning the gray afternoon into an inferno of destruction. The battlefield had become a slaughter ground, where German confidence met American determination. In mere minutes, 11 more Panthers were reduced to burning scrap metal. Evans called it a turkey shoot afterward, but for the men firing those guns it was pure survival. Steel against steel, speed against brute force, courage against overwhelming odds. The German advance stopped cold in the muddy fields of Lorraine. Noon on September 19th brought a brief clearing in the fog, revealing the full scope of German intentions. Across rolling fields, more than 30 Panthers advanced in grim formation, their guns elevated and ready, armor glistening through dissipating haze. For Company C, this was the ultimate moment of truth. Captain Thomas Evans steadied his defensive line, every Hellcat dug in with turrets barely visible above ridge crests. The order was crystal clear. Hold fire until range closes to maximum effectiveness. Tension filled the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. Silence was broken only by grinding gears and hissing engines as German armor approached. Then came the command that would echo through military history. Fire. The opening American salvo struck with devastating accuracy that stunned both sides. Lead Panthers shuddered under impact, smoke erupting from open hatches, flames reaching toward the pale sky like grasping fingers. The German column stalled in complete confusion. Some tanks inexplicably turned broadside, exposing their vulnerable flanks to American gunners. It was exactly the fatal error defenders had hoped to see. Hellcats roared to life across the entire ridge line, guns firing in rapid rhythm like a deadly orchestra. Shell after shell slammed into enemy armor with tremendous impact. Each hit sparked explosions that illuminated the misty battlefield in flashes of orange and black destruction. Within minutes, 11 Panthers were reduced to twisted, burning wrecks scattered across the field. Survivors faltered, then retreated in disorder, leaving their dead behind. For Americans, it was nothing short of miraculous. A handful of lightly armored destroyers had stopped a wall of German steel. Among the crews, individual acts of valor etched themselves permanently into legend. Private Frank Armino served as gunner on his very first day in combat. He destroyed 5 Panthers in rapid succession, his name forever linked to the fury of Arracourt. Across the defensive line, other gunners maintained devastating fire, reloading with frantic speed, voices hoarse from shouting over the roar of their own weapons. The battlefield became a thunderous symphony of muzzle flashes, ricochets, and exploding German armor. Then came a moment none of the survivors would ever forget. General George S. Patton himself arrived at the hillside command post. Standing beside Colonel Bruce Clark, he gazed down at the valley spread below them. The field was littered with burning hulks. German machines that once symbolized Hitler's armored might were now reduced to twisted carcasses of blackened steel. Patton's words were characteristically few, but powerfully memorable. "This is the kind of thing that's going to end the war quicker than anybody had hoped." With that simple statement, he climbed back into his jeep, leaving behind men who finally understood they had achieved something truly extraordinary. The Battle of Arracourt had reached its dramatic climax. In the span of a single afternoon, the feared Panthers had been mauled beyond recognition. Their assault was shattered against American speed, cunning, and sheer ferocity. What began as a desperate German counterstroke had instead become a showcase of Allied resolve. A defining moment when light and agile triumphed decisively over heavy and brutal. The climax had been written in fire and steel across the fields of Lorraine. Echoes of that September afternoon would resonate far beyond the immediate battlefield. September 20th dawned with the same choking fog that had dominated previous days. American units, believing German forces were finally broken, began repositioning for continued advance. Columns formed to move northeast toward new objectives. But the mist concealed yet another deadly surprise. At mid-morning, the 113th Panzer Brigade struck again with desperate fury. Tanks emerged like phantoms from white walls of fog, appearing suddenly behind American formations. For one terrifying moment, it seemed the tables might finally turn in Germany's favor. But American response was swift and coordinated. Sherman tanks wheeled about to engage at close range. Artillery batteries adjusted fire to new coordinates. Tank destroyers raced to threatened positions. Another 6 German vehicles were destroyed before this assault collapsed completely. The pattern was becoming clear. Each German attack grew progressively weaker as irreplaceable losses mounted steadily. Reinforcements poured into the Arracourt sector throughout the day. The 691st and 602nd Tank Destroyer Battalions arrived with full complements of fresh crews and vehicles. Infantry from the 35th Division formed solid perimeters around key positions. With every passing hour, German offensive capability diminished further. Their formations bled strength they could not replace from dwindling reserves. September 21st brought another furious assault against strengthened American lines. Hellcats, Shermans, and field guns combined in devastating storms of coordinated fire. By evening, 18 more German tanks lay wrecked in the churned mud, their long-barreled guns pointing uselessly at gray skies. American losses were real and painful. Sherman tanks knocked out, crews killed and wounded. But the exchange ratios remained devastatingly one-sided in Allied favor. September 22nd brought eerie quiet to the battlefield. Fog remained thick as ever, reducing visibility to mere yards. German probes met scattered resistance before being quickly beaten back by alert defenders. In one small clash near Jubilees, a single M18 covering the withdrawal of cavalry units destroyed 3 German tanks in quick succession. Then it slipped away into concealing mist before enemy forces could respond. Such acts of defiance underscored the growing confidence of American crews. They had learned through bitter experience that speed and precision could counter even the thickest armor plating. Germans, by contrast, were clearly unraveling under sustained pressure. Reports filtered back describing miscommunication, poor coordination, and shattered morale spreading through Panzer Brigade ranks. September 23rd saw the 111th Panzer Brigade launch yet another assault from eastern approaches. But the outcome was already predetermined by previous encounters. From ridgeline positions, American tanks and Hellcats tore into advancing formations with practiced efficiency. Overhead, fighter bombers swooped through breaks in the mist, strafing infantry columns and hammering German armor with rockets and cannon fire. The combination of ground and air power proved utterly devastating. Captain Thomas Evans fought with reckless personal courage throughout the engagement. He manned a disabled Hellcat to keep its gun firing until the vehicle was finally destroyed around him. For such actions, he would later receive the Silver Star. By September 24th, the German offensive had collapsed entirely across all sectors. What was intended as a crushing blow to Patton's Third Army had instead become complete disaster for the Reich. In just over a week of sustained fighting, Americans claimed nearly 285 German tanks and assault guns destroyed. Their own losses totaled fewer than 35 armored vehicles of all types. The disparity was undeniable and shocking. Fields that once echoed with thunder of engines now lay silent, littered with blackened carcasses of German armor. The battle had been won not through superior armor, but through doctrine emphasizing speed, surprise, and relentless aggression. For men who survived Arracourt, memories were seared permanently into consciousness. The acrid stench of burning steel, eerie glow of flames through fog, sudden silence after hours of thunderous combat. They knew they had faced one of the Reich's strongest counteroffensives on the entire Western Front. They had broken it completely through courage and skill. Their thin-skinned Hellcats, underestimated by both friend and foe, had carved an immortal legend into the history of armored warfare. The Battle of Arracourt accomplished far more than simply halting a German counteroffensive. It fundamentally reshaped perceptions of armored warfare throughout the Western Front and beyond. For the Reich, defeat was absolutely catastrophic on multiple levels. Newly formed panzer brigades, rushed into combat with minimal training and virtually no coordination, were gutted beyond any hope of recovery. Nearly 300 tanks and assault guns had been lost in little more than a single week of fighting. Never again would German forces mount such a large-scale armored thrust in the West before the final desperate gamble of the Ardennes offensive. The iron spearhead Hitler had trusted to stop Patton's advance was shattered permanently in the muddy fields of Lorraine. For Americans, victory provided crucial validation of controversial tactical doctrines. The M18 Hellcat, dismissed by many critics as too fragile for serious combat operations, had proven its worth beyond all doubt. Speed, agility, and daring tactics had transformed thin armor into a weapon of devastating surprise. When properly coordinated with artillery, infantry, and air power, Mobile ambush tactics could defeat even the most formidable tanks in the German arsenal. Arracourt became a textbook example of combined arms warfare, demonstrating how flexibility and coordination could triumph decisively over brute strength alone. Veterans who fought in those fog-shrouded September days carried memories for the remainder of their lives. They recalled swirling mist that reduced the world to gray shadows, sudden appearance of dark shapes emerging from white void, tremendous recoil of their guns firing at maximum rate, desperate cries of wounded comrades. They remembered moments of pure terror when German shells zeroed in on muzzle flashes, moments of fierce triumph when single well-placed shots sent Panthers erupting into towering columns of flame. For these men, Arracourt represented more than tactical victory. It was proof that skill and courage could overcome seemingly impossible odds. In months that followed, military historians and field commanders studied the battle intensively. Analysts pointed to the Hellcats' remarkable speed, discipline of veteran crews, and seamless coordination between ground forces and close air support. They noted that German Panthers, absolutely deadly on open ground at long range, became vulnerable when forced into close-quarters duels. Above all, Arracourt demonstrated that advanced technology alone never decided battles. Doctrine, training, and leadership mattered equally. Today, the fields near Arracourt remain quiet and peaceful, marked only by scattered memorials and fading memories of those who fought there. Yet crucial lessons endure for military professionals worldwide. The Hellcat, once considered too lightly built for serious combat, is remembered as one of the war's most effective tank destroyers. Its decisive role at Arracourt cemented its legacy as the machine that showed the world the tremendous power of speed and surprise over armor and weight alone. During that mist-shrouded week of September 1944, the fundamental balance of battlefield dynamics tilted forever. The mighty Panthers had been humbled by opponents they should have crushed easily. The underestimated Hellcats had earned their permanent place in military history through courage, skill, and revolutionary tactical thinking.